Hadley, and yeah, I'm the one who pulled the plug on my parents' 50th anniversary celebration 3 days before it was supposed to happen. The whole thing. The waterfront venue, the catering, the string quartet my mother had bragged about for months. Gone. But here's what people don't get when they hear that part first. It wasn't the photos. It wasn't even that morning my mother stood in her kitchen and told the florist I didn't need to be in the centerpiece arrangement because, and I quote, divorced women throw off the symmetry. It was 38 years of being the wrong daughter, the one who didn't fit the frame. You ever feel like your family loves the idea of you more than the actual you? Like they need you to be someone you're not, and when you can't be that person anymore, suddenly you're a problem? That's where I lived for most of my life. Until I didn't. The morning it really started, I was in my studio in Savannah finishing up edits from a wedding I'd shot the weekend before. My place is a converted carriage house off Whitaker Street, brick walls, big north-facing windows that good life photographers will sell their souls for. I was halfway through a bridal portrait, dodging the highlights on her veil when my phone lit up. My mother's name. I let it ring twice before I picked up. With her, you always need those 2 extra seconds. Hadley, sweetheart, she said, and I could already hear the tone. The careful one, the one that meant she was about to ask for something dressed up as a favor. We need to talk about the program. The program for what? I asked, even though I knew. Her and my father's 50th wedding anniversary. The renewal of vows. 5 months of planning. 4 months of me being the unpaid event coordinator because, you do this kind of thing for a living. Sweetheart and family helps family. Just a small adjustment, she said. About the photos. I set the stylist down. Okay, your sister and I were talking and we think it might be cleaner if we kept the formal portraits to immediate family. Original family unit. What does that mean? A pause. The kind of pause she used when she was about to say something cruel in a voice soft as cotton. Just your father and me, and your sister with her husband and the boys? It looks more cohesive. We don't want anything that feels off. You don't want me in the family photos. Now, Hadley, don't make this dramatic. We just don't want anyone looking at the picture and asking questions. About things. You understand. I didn't say anything for a moment. I stared out the window at the live oak in the courtyard, the Spanish moss moving slow in the September heat. I understood perfectly. The thing she didn't want anyone asking about was my divorce. 2.5 years old now, finalized cleanly, no kids involved, no drama on my end. But to my mother, it was a stain she'd been trying to scrub off the family name since the day I told her. I'm sorry, I said, my voice level the way it gets when I'm working not to shake. You want me to come to the anniversary, run the timeline, coordinate the vendors I personally booked, but stand out of the pictures because I'm divorced. Hadley, you're telling me I'm not part of the original family unit. Don't twist this. You know what I mean? Look, you can be in the candid shots, the mingling ones. We just don't want the framed portraits to look unbalanced. Unbalanced. She sighed, like I was the difficult one. Sweetheart, you know how your sister gets about these things. Everyone has their feelings. Let's just keep the peace. I told her I'd think about it. I hung up. I sat at my desk for a long time with the cursor still blinking on that bridal portrait, and I thought about peace. About how my whole life, peace had meant me being smaller, quieter, less of whatever I actually was. You have to understand, this wasn't new. My older sister was, and always had been, the daughter my mother actually wanted. Tal, married to a corporate attorney, 2 boys in private school, a house in a development with stone lions at the gate. She fit the brochure. I was the other one. The one who'd gone to art school. The one who'd married the wrong guy and then had the gall to leave him before she could be properly martyred about it. When I was a kid, I'd watch my mother brag about my sister's grades, her ballet, her piano, and then she'd remember I was in the room and say something like, "And Hadley, well, she's our creative one." Said the way you might say she's our slow one. The divorce had made it worse. He wasn't a bad man. He just wasn't a good husband, and I wasn't a good wife to him, and we both knew it for years before we admitted it. There was no affair, no money problems, just 2 people who'd married at 26 because everyone expected them to, and woken up at 33 realizing they didn't actually know each other. When I told my mother we were separating, she cried. Not for me. For the Christmas card photos. For what people would say at the club. She actually said in that conversation, "How am I supposed to explain this to your aunt?" Like my marriage existed to make her social life easier. After that call about the photos, I drove home through River Street and sat in my apartment with the lights off for a while. My place is a third-floor walk-up over a bookshop, exposed beams, slanted ceilings, the kind of place I dreamed about in my 20s and finally bought myself last year. Mine. Just mine. No one else's name on the deed. I poured a glass of bourbon and stood at the window watching the river, and I thought about all the small ways she'd been carving me out of the family for years, and how I'd kept showing up anyway. Like a dog that keeps coming back to the same hand. The next morning, I called my sister, not because I expected anything, because I wanted to be sure. She picked up on the fourth ring, sounded distracted, kids yelling in the background. I asked her about the photos. "Oh," she said, "Mom mentioned, look, it's not personal. It's just for the official portraits. We want a clean look. A clean look. You know what I mean. The grandkids, the husbands, the original four. It's a 50th anniversary. We're trying to make a moment. And I'm not part of the moment." She made a sound, not quite a laugh. "Don't be like this. You know how Mom is. Just go with it. You'll be in plenty of the other pictures. I'm coordinating the entire event," I said, "and we appreciate that. Truly, you're so good at this stuff." "That's why we asked you. You so good at this stuff." "That's why we asked you." "You didn't ask. You assumed, Hadley." "I'm going to go." I hung up before she could do that thing she does, that warm correction in her voice that always made me feel like I was overreacting. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and I started to cry, but only for about a minute. Then I got up and made coffee and opened my laptop and I started looking at my files. Every vendor I'd booked, every contract I'd signed using my business credit card because she wanted the deposits handled quickly and she'd pay me back, which of course she hadn't, and which of course I'd never pressed her on because that's how it always worked. I'd give, they'd take. We'd call it love. The first weekend after that, I drove up to Charleston anyway. I told myself it was for the final vendor walkthrough at the venue. The truth was that I needed to see it for myself. The way they'd be. The proof, I guess. You always hope. Even when you know better, you hope something will be different. My parents' house is in the historic district, one of those tall, narrow houses with the side porches and the Charleston green shutters. I'd grown up there. My old bedroom was on the third floor under the eaves with a dormer window that looked out over the garden. I parked behind my sister's SUV and let myself in through the back door, the way I always had. The kitchen smelled like coffee and the lemon polish my mother used on the wood floors. My father was at the kitchen table with the newspaper, reading glasses halfway down his nose. He looked up. "Hadley, you made it. Hey, Dad." He didn't get up. He never did. He gave me that small, careful smile he'd given me my whole life. The one that said he loved me in his way but wasn't going to do anything about anything. My father is the kind of man who lets the women in his life sort out the women in his life and stays out of it. I used to think it was kindness. It isn't. My mother came down the stairs in linen pants and the pearl earrings she only wore when she wanted to be looked at. "Hadley, you're early. We weren't expecting you until lunch. Just wanted to check a few things at the venue," I said. She nodded, distracted, already turning toward the dining room. "Your sister's coming over at noon. We're going to finalize the seating chart." I followed her in. The dining room table was covered in clipboards and fabric swatches and stack after stack of escort cards with my mother's handwriting on them. I picked one up. A name I didn't recognize. "Who's this?" "Oh, that's the Pemberton boy. He's joining your father's law practice next year. Lovely young man. Why is he at the immediate family table?" "Well, the immediate family table is also the head table, sweetheart. We just thought it would be nicer to put a few of your father's protégés up there. For optics." I set the card down. "I'm at the head table, though." She didn't look at me. She was straightening the swatches. "We have you at table 4, with your cousins. We thought you'd be more comfortable. The cousin table. It's a lovely table, Hadley. Your cousin from Charlotte is going to be there. I haven't seen her in 12 years. Well, then it'll be nice to catch up." I stood there in my parents' dining room in the house I grew up in, holding a place card with a stranger's name printed on it. And I felt the thing I always feel in that house. Like I was watching myself from the ceiling. Like none of it was actually happening to me. I went upstairs without saying anything. My old bedroom is a sewing room now. Has been for years. But I always go up there when I'm in that house, the way you press on a bruise to remind yourself it's still there. The dormer window was the same. The view of the garden was the same. The bed I'd slept in until I was 18 had been replaced with a sewing machine table and a dress form. There was a basket of fabric scraps in the corner where my desk used to be. I sat on the floor next to it for a minute. I don't know why. I just sat there. Later, when my sister arrived, the three of them sat at the kitchen table and went through the timeline, and I sat with them. And every time I offered a suggestion, my mother would say something like, "We already spoke to the planner," or, "Your sister had a thought about that," even though I was the planner. Even though I was technically on retainer with my own family for free. By the time the afternoon was over, I'd been corrected on the menu I designed, the lighting I specified, and the playlist I'd spent 2 weekends building. My sister had also, somewhere in the middle of it, mentioned to my mother that her photographer friend Brielle from Atlanta could just do the formal portraits if it was easier, just to take it off Hadley's plate. My mother lit up. "Oh, that would be wonderful. Hadley's so busy." I said nothing. I'd been hired, by my own family, to photograph my own parents' anniversary, and now I was being unhired in front of myself for an Atlanta stranger named Brielle. I drove the 2 hours back to Savannah that night with the windows down and the radio off, and somewhere on the dark stretch of 17 outside Hardyville, I started laughing. Not happy laughing. The other kind. The kind where you've finally seen something so clearly you don't know what else to do. The next 2 weeks, I went through the motions. I confirmed deposits. I answered vendor questions. I sent my mother a sample of the menu cards because she decided at the last minute that she wanted them in eggshell instead of cream. I did all of it. And the whole time I was doing it, I was also doing something else. I was making a different list. A quiet one. On a notepad I kept in my desk drawer. The list was every contract I'd signed for that event. Every vendor whose deposit was on my business card, every reservation that was, legally, in my name, the venue, the caterer, the string quartet, the florist, the lighting company, the cake, the valet service, the custom letterpress invitations my mother had insisted on then complained about the font of, the rental linens, the harpist for the cocktail hour, which my mother had added 2 weeks ago without telling me, but which I'd booked because they needed a credit card to hold the date. Every single one was in my name, because she'd never gotten around to paying me back for the deposits, because, in her words, "We'll settle up after." I knew exactly what I was doing when I wrote that list. I want you to know that. I wasn't confused. I wasn't reactive. I was clear-headed in a way I hadn't been in years. The third weekend, I drove back up to Charleston for what was supposed to be a final family lunch before the event. The renewal was on a Saturday. The lunch was the Sunday before. My mother had decided we needed to sit down as a family and go over the day of timing. I got there a little after noon. My sister was there with her husband and the boys. My father was at the table. My aunt and uncle had come down from Columbia. My mother had laid out a real spread, the silver out, the good china, a centerpiece I hadn't approved that I could already tell was the wrong shade of orange for the dress she'd chosen for the actual event. Nobody noticed I'd come in. I stood in the doorway of the dining room for a full 10 seconds before my sister glanced up. "Oh, hey, you made it." "Yeah, we were just talking about you," my aunt said, which is the kind of thing people say when they've absolutely been talking about you. "Were you?" She laughed lightly. "Oh, Hadley. Your mother was just saying how relieved she'll be when this weekend's over. So much to do." I sat down. My mother was on the other end of the table, holding court, talking about the ceremony order. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. Then she said it. "I just don't want any awkwardness," she said to my aunt, not looking at me. "You know how it can be. With a divorced daughter at this kind of thing, people do notice. It's why we kept the formal portraits tight." My aunt made a non-committal sound. My sister did not look up from her phone. My father was buttering a roll. I set the water glass down, carefully. The way you set something down when your hands are about to start shaking and you don't want to give yourself away. Mom? She turned surprised, like she hadn't realized I could hear her from 6 feet away. Yes, sweetheart. I'd like you to not talk about me like I'm not here. A flicker. The mask, then back. Oh, Hadley, don't be sensitive. I'm not being sensitive. I'm being clear. You're talking about me to my aunt, at your table, while I'm sitting here. And you're talking about me like my marriage ending is something that happened to you. My sister looked up now. Had. Come on. I'm not coming on. I'm asking my mother why she keeps doing this. Doing what? My mother said. And now her voice had that warning underneath it, the one I'd been afraid of my whole life. Treating me like I'm a problem you have to manage, booking me to do the job, then humiliating me at the table I'm sitting at. Telling me I'm not in the photos because I'm not part of the original family unit, putting me at the cousin table at my own parents' anniversary. The room went quiet. My father stopped buttering. My mother set her napkin down. Hadley, lower your voice. I am not raising my voice. This is exactly what I was talking about. This is exactly the kind of thing that ruins a celebration. You have a way of making everything about you. I felt something in my chest crack open. Not hot, cold, very cold. I'm not making anything about me, I said. I'm telling you what you've actually done. Oh, please. She gave a small laugh, the one she used at parties when someone had said something she found gauche. You've always been theatrical. You and your sister completely different. She always knew how to behave. I looked at my sister. She did not look at me. I looked at my father. He was studying his plate. I looked back at my mother and I said, very quietly, "You don't actually want me there, do you?" Not really. She didn't answer for a beat too long. Then she said, "Don't be ridiculous. Of course we want you there. We just want you to act like a guest, not the center of attention. This is our day. I'm not the center of attention. I'm your daughter. Honestly, Hadley, if you're going to be like this all weekend, maybe you should just sit it out. We can manage. You're stressing yourself." There it was, right out in the open, in front of everyone. The kindest of all her cruelties, the one she dressed up as concern. Maybe you should just sit it out. As if I'd been begging to be included. As if she were doing me a favor. I stood up. I didn't even know I was going to. My chair scraped back. "You know what?" I said. "You're right. I'll sit it out." My sister rolled her eyes. "Oh, for God's sake." My mother said, "Hadley, don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene," I said. "I'm leaving lunch." I walked out of that dining room. My father didn't get up. My sister didn't follow. My mother called after me once, my name, in the tone that meant, "Come back here so I can correct you," and I kept walking. I got in my car. I drove. I made it about 10 minutes down East Bay Street before I had to pull over because I couldn't see through the tears. Not sad tears. The other kind. Adrenaline tears. The kind that come when something has finally broken loose in you. I sat in the car for half an hour. I watched the cars go by. I watched a woman walk a giant black dog past my window. I watched a tour carriage roll past, with people taking pictures of houses I'd lived between my whole life, and in that half hour, I made a decision. Not in anger. That's the part I want to be clear about. I want you to hear me on this. It was not anger. It was the strangest, calmest thing I have ever felt. I drove home to Savannah. I did not stop. I did not call anyone. When I got back to my apartment, I made coffee. I sat down at my kitchen counter with my laptop, and I opened the folder labeled with my parents' last name and the year, every contract, every vendor email thread, every signed agreement. And one by one, I started canceling. I want to tell you exactly how it went because the order matters. The venue was first because the venue had a 48-hour cancellation window and we were inside of it, but I had the contract in my name and I could invoke the force majeure clause for a 50% refund. I emailed the events manager. I was polite. I was professional. I had done this job for other people 100 times. Due to unforeseen family circumstances, we will need to cancel the reservation under contract number such and such. Please process per our agreement. Please confirm receipt. She replied in 11 minutes. Confirmation attached. Then the caterer, then the florist who I called personally because she was a friend and I wanted her to hear it from me, and who, when I told her what had happened, said, "Oh, honey, no," and refunded my deposit in full without making me ask. Then the lighting people, who were less gracious, but a contract is a contract. Then the string quartet. Then the harpist. Then the harpist. Then the valet service. Then the rentals. Then the letterpress woman, who only had the menu cards left to deliver, and who told me I'd been her favorite client to work with all year. In 4 hours, I unmade an event that had taken 5 months to build. I did not feel powerful. I did not feel vengeful. I felt vengeful. I felt very, very still. The way you feel after a long fever finally breaks and you're lying in clean sheets, exhausted, but yourself again. The phone started ringing around 6 p.m. I let it. My mother called 4 times, my sister called twice. My aunt called once, which surprised me. My father did not call, he never does. I made dinner. I put on a record. I sat on my couch and ate pasta and listened to Nina Simone, and I did not pick up the phone. At 7:30, my mother left a voicemail. I listened to it once. Hadley, what are you doing? The venue just called me to confirm cancellation. This is insane behavior. You call me back right now. Do you understand what you're doing? Do you understand what people are going to say? What people were going to say? That's the part that told me everything. Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? Not, sweetheart, did we hurt you? What people were going to say. I deleted the voicemail. At 9, my sister texted, "Mom is hysterical. Call her. This is so unlike you." I read it twice. This is so unlike you. As if the version of me she'd known, the version who'd swallow anything to keep things smooth, was the real me. As if the woman who'd finally said enough was a stranger. Maybe she was to them. Maybe that was the point. I sent one message that night. To my mother. You told me I wasn't part of the original family unit. I believed you. So the original family unit can plan its own party. I turned my phone off. I slept better than I had in weeks. By Monday morning, news had spread. Charleston is a small town in the way Charleston is a small town, which is to say, everybody knows everybody and gossip moves through the historic district like a kitchen fire. My phone had 37 missed calls by the time I turned it on. My aunt. 2 of my mother's friends I hadn't spoken to since high school. A cousin I didn't know had my number. The wife of my father's law partner, even, somehow, an old neighbor. I didn't return any of them. I drove to my studio. I had a senior portrait session at 10 that I was not going to miss. I edited photos. I drank coffee. I lived my life. Around 3 p.m., I got an email from my father. The first email he had ever sent me in my entire life. That wasn't forwarded news article or a tax document. It said, "We need to talk. Please." I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed my laptop and went home. I didn't write back for 2 days. When I did, I said, "You can come to Savannah. I'm not coming to Charleston." He came on a Thursday. He drove himself, which surprised me. I met him at a coffee shop on Bull Street. Neutral ground? Public. I needed it public. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, which was only 3 weeks ago. Maybe that's just what guilt does to a face. He sat down across from me. He didn't say hi. He said, "I should have stood up for you. A long time ago." I didn't say anything. He looked at his hands. "I let her talk about you that way for years. I told myself she didn't mean it, or that it would blow over, or that you were tough enough to take it." He paused. "The truth is, I was a coward, and it cost you a family." I felt my throat do that thing. I didn't let myself cry. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I don't expect anything. I just wanted to say it once, out loud, so I could live with myself." We sat there for a while. I drank my coffee. He drank his. He told me my mother was, in his words, beside herself, that she was telling everyone I'd had some kind of breakdown, that she would never recover from the embarrassment. He said it the way you'd describe weather. He said my sister had stopped speaking to him because he wouldn't take her side. He said the renewal was not going to happen. There was no money to rebook on 3 days' notice. The guests had been told there was a family emergency. "You okay?" he asked me. "I am," I said. "I think I actually am." He nodded. He looked out the window for a minute. Then he said, Your grandmother, my mother. She used to say something to me when I was a boy. She used to say, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for somebody is stop pretending you don't see what they are. I looked at him. I see what your mother is, he said. I should have said it 40 years ago. I drove him to his car after. He hugged me before he got in. He smelled like the cedar of his closet, the same smell from when I was a kid. He didn't say anything else. He just got in his car and drove back to Charleston. I never spoke to my mother again. Not because I planned it that way. Not because I made some big declaration. I just stopped picking up. She sent letters, 3 of them in her angry, formal handwriting, not apologies, each one a different version of the same thing, which was that she didn't understand what had happened, and that I had embarrassed the family, and that she was willing to move past it if I was. I read them. I didn't write back. I put them in a drawer. My sister and I haven't spoken either. She tried, a few months in, with a long text about how everything had gotten out of hand and how she missed me. I read it twice. I didn't answer. I think about her sometimes. I don't miss her. That surprises me even now. I think I miss the idea of having a sister. The way I miss the idea of having a mother. The actual people, no. Not really. My father and I have lunch every 6 weeks. He drives down. We don't talk about her mostly. We talk about my work, about his cases, about a fishing trip he's planning to take with his brother. It's the relationship I should have had with him my whole life. I'm trying not to be bitter about getting it this late. Some days I manage. That fall, I opened a second studio, a small storefront on a side street in Charleston, of all places. I didn't plan it that way. I'd been looking at spaces in Atlanta, but the right place came up in Charleston, and the math worked, and I thought, well, why not? Why not live in the place I grew up in, on my own terms, in my own name, doing my own work? I called it Birch and Frame. The birch was for the trees in the park behind my new studio. The frame was for the obvious reason. I do weddings, family portraits, and increasingly what I call legacy sessions, where adult children come in with their parents and we do real photographs. Not the stiff kind. The actual kind. The kind that show what people look like when they're loved. Sometimes a client will sit in my chair and tell me about her mother and I'll listen. I don't usually share my own story. It's not the place. But once in a while, when a woman is sitting across from me with that look I know so well, the one that says, am I crazy or is this actually happening to me? I'll tell her a piece of it. I'll tell her about the photos, about the cousin table, about the 4 hours one Sunday afternoon when I quietly took apart a celebration that had been built on the idea that I was an embarrassment to attend, and they always ask the same question. They always ask if I regret it. Here's what I tell them. I tell them that for 38 years, I tried to earn a place at a table that had never actually been set for me. I tell them that love that requires you to be smaller is not love. It's a contract. And you're allowed to break a contract you never agreed to in the first place. If you've made it this far, I want to tell you one more thing. If you're watching this and you've ever been the wrong daughter, the one they correct at the table, the one whose name they leave off the invitation, the one whose marriage or job or body or choices have become something the family has decided not to talk about, if you've ever sat at a holiday dinner and watched everyone laugh at a joke you weren't in on and felt like a ghost in the room you were standing in, I see you. I really do. You are allowed to stop showing up to be diminished. You are allowed to be a stranger to people who refuse to know the real you. You are allowed to leave a table that was never going to make room for you, and you are allowed to build your own. The day I canceled that party, I thought I was burning my life down. Turns out I was finally building one. And the one I built, the small one, the quiet one, the one with my name on the deed and my photographs on the walls, and a father who finally sees me and a chair at the kitchen counter for people who actually want to be there, that one fits. For the first time in my life, the chair fits. So tell me, in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from the family you were given so you could find the family you choose? Or are you still sitting at the cousin table hoping someone notices you're not where you're supposed to be? Drop a heart. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe. There's more coming. There's always more. We just have to keep telling the truth about what it costs to keep ourselves alive inside families that wanted us softer. I'll see you in the next one. I think about that Sunday at the dining room table more than I should. Not because I regret what I did, but because it took me 38 years to do it. 38 years of believing that if I just smiled a little wider, swallowed a little harder, and showed up one more time, my mother would finally see me the way she saw my sister. That belief was the most expensive thing I ever owned. It cost me a marriage I rushed into to please her. It cost me years of art I didn't make because I was too tired from performing. It cost me the version of myself I might have been if I hadn't spent my 20s trying to earn a seat at a table that was never going to be set for me. Here is what I learned. Slowly. The hard way. Causes have consequences. My mother spent 40 years building a daughter who was useful and silent, and she got exactly the daughter she built, right up until the day she went 1 inch too far. The photos were not the wound. The photos were the moment the wound finally spoke. When you treat a person like an embarrassment long enough, one of two things happens. Either they shrink down to nothing, or they remember who they were before you told them who to be. I am grateful, in a way I cannot fully explain, that I was the second kind. I want to say something about strength because that word gets used a lot and I think people misunderstand it. Strength is not the moment I canceled the venue. That part was easy. The hard part was the 38 years of small, quiet, daily strength it took to keep going back, to keep hoping, to keep showing up to a family that had decided I was the problem. The strength to walk away is not bigger than the strength to keep loving badly loved people. It is just different. And eventually, if you are paying attention, one becomes the other. If you are sitting somewhere right now watching this and you recognize my mother in your own, or you recognize my sister or my father or the cousin table, I want you to hear me. You do not owe your dignity to the people who gave you life. You owe them gratitude for the gift, and that is the whole of the debt. The rest you choose. Whether they earn the rest is up to them, not you. Loving people does not mean letting them define you. Forgiveness does not require you to keep handing them the knife. What I have now is smaller than what I had before. Fewer phone calls on Sunday. No big family Christmases. An empty chair at the holidays that used to have my mother in it. But what I have is mine. The work is mine. The apartment is mine. The lunch with my father every 6 weeks is mine. Earned. Real. The quiet is mine. I sleep better. I laugh more. I take pictures of other people's families and I see them clearly, and I love that work because I know now what it costs to be seen. Choose yourself, not because it is brave, because it is the one thing nobody else can do for you.